Around a decade ago, I relocated to Seattle without a job or a place to live. It proved to be a challenge finding an apartment without employment, despite having some savings. I scoured Craigslist and Facebook for available places, but it was rare to find a rental that suited my situation. Eventually, I stumbled upon a room for rent on Craigslist. It was located in the basement of a house and had a private bathroom. While it wasn't inexpensive, costing around $800 per month paid up front, it was my only viable option at the time. Upon my arrival, the landlord warmly greeted me and provided a tour of the old, character-filled house. There was no communal living room, only a shared kitchen and laundry room for common use. The house had 3 bedrooms on the main floor and 2 in the basement. 3 other individuals occupied the house at that time. George, an older gentleman, Angela, a young woman, and Kirk, a man in his mid-30s. Though I didn't have much opportunity to interact with them initially, they seemed amiable enough. During the first few days, daily life was rather uneventful. I would occasionally cross paths with the roommates, but our interactions were minimal. However, approximately a week into my stay, things took a strange turn. I recall returning home one day to find Kirk acting peculiarly. He appeared restless, pacing back and forth in the kitchen. Upon noticing me, he swiftly regained composure and greeted me with a smile. That night, I heard unsettling noises emanating from Kirk's nearby basement room. It sounded as if he were moving furniture or engaging in some unusual activity. In hindsight, it was undoubtedly a red flag. The following morning, as I prepared coffee, Kirk entered the kitchen. Although we didn't exchange words, there was an undeniable tension in the air. I felt uneasy, but couldn't quite articulate why. Over the ensuing days, Kirk's peculiar behavior became more frequent and conspicuous. He often arrived home late at night, muttering to himself within the confines of his room. Initially, I assumed he was engaged in phone conversations, but something about it felt off. I'm now certain he was talking to himself. One night, I was awakened by piercing screams originating from Angela's room. Alarmed, I hurriedly rushed towards her room, but as I drew nearer, I discerned Kirk's voice accompanying the commotion. He was saying something to Angela. Unsure of what to do, I stayed back and listened, hoping to make sense of the situation. After a few minutes, the screaming ceased, and an eerie silence enveloped the house. Sleep eluded me for the remainder of the night. The following morning, I approached Angela, visibly shaken from the previous night's ordeal, to inquire about what had transpired. Understandably, she was reluctant to discuss it. Deep down, I knew something was gravely amiss, but I felt powerless. Although the thought of involving the police crossed my mind, I lacked concrete evidence to substantiate any wrongdoing. To this day, I'm unsure of the exact events that unfolded that night. Over the subsequent days, Kirk's behavior deteriorated further. He became increasingly irritable, snapping at the slightest provocation, and exhibiting erratic conduct. Approximately a week later, Kirk abruptly ceased leaving his room altogether. I could hear him conversing with himself from behind a closed door. Concern for my safety and that of the other roommates began to consume me. A few days later, the situation reached its climax. Returning home from work one day, I discovered George distressed on the front porch. He divulged a deeply disturbing encounter. He had ventured into Kirk's room to request a reduction in volume, only to stumble upon a disconcerting sight. The room was strewn with knives and other sharp objects, and a substantial bloodstain marked the floor. We promptly notified the police, detailing George's discovery. Upon their arrival, the house was thoroughly searched, but Kirk had vanished, likely fleeing as soon as George encountered his room. The police did uncover evidence suggesting Kirk's involvement in something sinister. After a few days, the authorities managed to apprehend Kirk, who was subsequently arrested and charged. The blood stain on his floor was linked to a missing person. Ultimately, all of us vacated the house, each going our separate ways. Occasionally, I find myself reflecting on the events that transpired and pondering how I could have shared a residence with someone so malevolent. In 2016, I completed my college education and relocated to Chicago. My primary goal was to find an affordable rental within the city, which led me to scour Craigslist for weeks. Despite reaching out to numerous listings and making countless calls, most of the places I came across were beyond my budget. At the time, I was employed at a parking lot, striving to secure a job related to my field of study. Given the limited income, it proved quite challenging to find a place within my means. However, one day, I stumbled upon a potentially suitable advertisement. It offered a room for rent in a shared house. The pictures didn't appear too bad, and the price seemed reasonable. Encouraged, I responded to the ad and arranged a viewing with the landlord, Trevor. Admittedly, I wasn't particularly thrilled about the neighborhood, as it had a sketchy reputation. Nevertheless, I decided I could endure it temporarily until I saved up enough to relocate to a better area. The reality of the situation matched my expectations. As long as the place was reasonably clean and safe, I didn't feel the need to complain. On the day of the viewing, I arrived at the address provided by Trevor. The house looked dilapidated, with peeling paint and even a broken window on the top floor. Despite my initial hesitation, I didn't want to waste the trip I had made. Trevor greeted me at the door, and it was evident right away that he wasn't someone to be taken lightly. He was a large man covered in tattoos, possessed a thick New York accent, and exuded a gruff demeanor. While I understood that appearances could be misleading, his energy gave off negative vibes. He seemed angry, though I couldn't discern the reason behind it. Nonetheless, I proceeded inside. Trevor led me upstairs to the room, which emitted a combination of mold and stale cigarette smoke. As we traversed the hallway, I noticed the stained and frayed carpet, along with the holes in the walls. When Trevor opened the door to the room, the sight before me nearly made me gag. It was minuscule, barely enough space for a bed and dresser. The yellowed walls showed their age, and the floor was dirty. The broken window and dusty windowsill added to the overall grimness. Trying to conceal my disgust, I failed to deceive Trevor, who discerned my lack of enthusiasm. With a chuckle, he commented, "It's not much, but it's better than sleeping on the streets, am I right?" I nodded, avoiding speaking my thoughts. Deep down, I yearned to leave immediately, but I didn't want to be impolite. Trevor proceeded to show me the rest of the apartment, which was equally disheartening. The bathroom was filthy, with a cracked toilet and an unclean shower that seemed untouched for months. The kitchen was a disaster zone, filled with dirty dishes strewn everywhere, and the fridge emitted a putrid odor. Feeling increasingly nauseous, Trevor remained oblivious to my discomfort as he continued attempting to convince me to take the room. While I knew he was lying, I chose not to argue. All I desired was to escape as swiftly as possible. I informed him that I needed time to consider and headed towards the stairs. However, he obstructed my path, seemingly offended and intimidating. He loomed over me, and given his size and my physical stature, I felt genuinely frightened. Despite my attempts to leave, he wouldn't allow it. Overwhelmed, I eventually relented and reluctantly agreed to take the room. Trevor stepped aside, granting me passage, and I descended the stairs. As soon as I exited the building, relief washed over me, and I finally felt able to breathe again. Walking a few blocks away, I stopped and pulled out my phone. I stared at Trevor's number on the screen, realizing what I needed to do. Without hesitation, I deleted his number, vowing never to look back. I understood that restarting my search for a place was necessary. However, I couldn't bear the thought of residing in that horrendous place, nor would I allow myself to be intimidated by Trevor. Determined, I persevered in my quest and eventually found an apartment that fit within my budget. It was a small basement bachelor unit, featuring low ceilings and a hot plate instead of a proper stove. However, it was clean, and the neighborhood proved safe. I resided there for a year, gradually improving my financial situation. Eventually, I secured a decent job and could afford a pleasant one-bedroom apartment. Last year, an incident occurred involving me, a 24-year-old woman. It all began when I decided to sell some items on Craigslist. Among my possessions, I had amassed a considerable collection of books, exceeding 200 in number. Fearing the hassle of moving them, I put up an advertisement on Craigslist, offering to sell around 50 of them. Within a few hours, I received a message from a woman named Carla expressing her interest in purchasing one of the books. She asked if she could come to my place to pick it up, which struck me as slightly odd since I preferred meeting in public. Nonetheless, I thought it would save me some trouble, so I agreed. My apartment, located on the ground floor of an older house, had both a front and back door exclusively for my use. 2 large windows adorned the front, surrounded by a wire fence. When Carla arrived at my house, she seemed friendly and was around my age. Sporting a black hoodie, she had her long dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. Carla mentioned she was in a hurry and asked if she could quickly grab the book and leave. At the time, I didn't think much of it and handed it over. I watched as she returned to her car and drove away. The following day, Carla messaged me again, expressing her interest in purchasing a few more books. She asked if she could come by my house once more to pick them up. I found it strange that she wanted to return so soon since she could have taken as many as she wanted before. After all, they weren't expensive. I was selling them for around $5 each. When Carla arrived at my house for the second time, something felt off. She seemed nervous, constantly glancing over her shoulder and displaying signs of paranoia, as if afraid of being followed. Concerned, I inquired if everything was all right, but she brushed it off, claiming to be in a hurry. The books she desired were placed on a small table next to the front door. As I walked over to retrieve them, I turned back to find Carla standing inside my house, blocking the doorway. She appeared shaken, her face displaying intense emotions, and she breathed heavily. Locking eyes with me, she took a step towards me. Fear gripped me at that moment, feeling utterly threatened. I sensed an imminent danger, fearing a potential stabbing or harm. In an attempt to protect myself, I sternly instructed her to stay back, but she disregarded my plea and continued advancing towards me. Reacting swiftly, I sprinted down the hallway and locked myself in the bathroom. While I hid in the bathroom, I could hear Carla rummaging through my apartment. It became apparent that I was being robbed, and I felt powerless to stop it. Without delay, I called the police, informing the operator of my predicament, hiding in the bathroom while being robbed. The operator assured me that help would arrive within a few minutes, but the wait felt agonizingly long. By the time the police arrived, Carla had vanished, leaving my apartment in shambles. Drawers lay scattered across the floor, and some of my belongings were broken. Though I didn't possess many valuable items, she took my TV and the money I had on my dresser, approximately $50. Since Carla and I had only communicated through email, there was no way to track her down. In fact, I wasn't even certain if Carla was her real name. Fast forward to a week later, while endlessly browsing Craigslist, I decided to search for a stolen TV, entertaining the unlikely thought that Carla might have posted it for sale there. To my astonishment, I discovered my TV listed on Craigslist, posted the day after I had been robbed. I was positive it was mine, as it bore a small dent on the side that I recognized. Wasting no time, I contacted the police again, who devised a small sting operation and successfully apprehended Carla. Not only did I recover my TV, but more importantly, a dangerous individual was removed from the streets. One evening, I found myself browsing Craigslist in search of a new lawnmower. The previous day, my old lawnmower had broken down, and my grass had become overgrown. Determined to find the best deal, I stumbled upon an ad advertising a lawnmower for a mere $30. Surprised by the seemingly good condition of the lawnmower and its affordable price, I believed it would serve me well for a considerable time. The ad included a phone number, prompting me to quickly send a text. fearing I might miss out on the opportunity. Roughly 5 minutes later, I received a response from a person named John. He introduced himself and inquired about my intention to purchase the lawnmower. Confirming my interest, he suggested that I visit him the following day at 8 p.m. Assuring me that the lawnmower would be prepared for my arrival, I promptly requested his address via text. John swiftly replied, providing an address situated approximately 10 minutes away from my home. Upon reaching the destination, I parked my car on the side of the road and notified John of my arrival. He directed me to enter through the back door of the house, since the front door was damaged and wouldn't open. Considering that obtaining the lawnmower was my main objective, I saw no issue with this arrangement. Exiting my car, I proceeded towards the house, making my way to the back. Surprisingly, the entire house appeared devoid of any light, creating an eerie atmosphere. Informing John of my presence, he instructed me to enter the basement. However, this request sparked a sense of unease within me. Why would the lawnmower be stored in the basement? Alarmed, I received another text from John, urging me to descend. At that moment, a wave of caution washed over me, and I began questioning the situation's legitimacy. Fearing a potential trap, I promptly decided to leave, hastening to my car and driving away. During my journey home, my phone began to ring, displaying an incoming call from John. Surprised by his sudden call, I opted to let it go to voicemail. Undeterred, John attempted to call me 2 more times, but I chose to ignore them both. Upon arriving home, I discovered that John had left a chilling voicemail, in which he menacingly threatened me, claiming he had my phone number and insinuating horrific acts. Acting swiftly, I blocked the number and contacted the authorities, recounting the entire ordeal. However, when I attempted to call the number again in the presence of the police, it appeared that it had been disconnected or no longer in service. I shared the voicemail with the officers, who informed me that I had narrowly escaped a dangerous situation. Although they couldn't take further action, I insisted on filing a report. Subsequently, I sought to report the ad on Craigslist, only to find that it had already been removed. It seemed that the individual responsible had meticulously covered their tracks. Regardless, I purchased a new lawnmower and resolved never to use Craigslist again, prioritizing my safety and peace of mind. Thank you for watching today's video. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and sharing it to support me.